Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and if you are new on my channel, then welcome. Today's video is the fourth and final episode of the Vault Collection series. I'm actually sad that it's ending because I have had so much fun with this. Anyway, today's video is all about the notorious Dark Magic palette. This one I believe is the black sheep of the Vault Collection family. This one is the one that people have most issues with, so we are going to be putting this one to the test. We're going to swatch it, we're going to see how it performs on the eyes and all that kind of stuff. Without further ado, let's get into the palette details. I'm sorry if you have seen all the episodes and this is getting very repetitive, but here goes. The packaging looks exactly the same as all the other palettes in the collection. There are green toned stars and rectangles and dots throughout the whole design on the front of the packaging, and these reference the color theme of this palette, which is, yes, surprise, surprise, green. And you also get the name on the side of the palette. The majority of the shadows in this one are matte, which I believe is the main reason that people are having so many issues with this specific palette. The palette comes with 10 eyeshadows, 3 of which are shimmery, 7 of which are matte. And I think it is worth mentioning that the shade Temptress is a bit of a weird one. If you look at it in the pan, it does have quite a bit of shimmer through it, but it is still a matte shadow. The shimmer does not transfer on the skin. Finally, the net weight and the price are exactly the same throughout this collection as well. So the palette weighs 16 grams or 0.56 ounces, and the retail price is $15 US if you decide to buy it separately, or if you get the whole bundle, which retails for $49 US, then the palette price comes down to an approximate $12 US. That is all the palette details that I have for you, so let's move on to swatches. Once again, we get to the swatches part, and I have to be honest guys, this palette was the one that I was looking forward to the most, because in this one there are quite a few shades that I've seen people struggle with. Yeah, let's just jump right into this. The first shade is called Poof. I don't know how well you guys are able to see that because it is extremely close to my skin tone, but that's the first shade over there. The second shade is called Power Cut. Oh, okay. The third shade is called Shh. The fourth shade is called Trickery. Again, wow. And the last shade in the first row is called Diversion. Yeah, okay, I am speechless. Now we get to the dupe swatches, and I have to say that I think this palette is the most unique out of the whole collection. Nothing in this palette resembles the shades Poof and Power Cut. The shade closest to Shh is Puta. They did look quite similar in the pan, but the shade Puta is visibly more warm toned. Next we get to Trickery, and this one is again visibly completely different from the shimmery emerald shade in the original Jaclyn Hill palette, which is Diva. But yeah, that is the closest one in the palette, so here goes Diva. The shade Diva is much more of a teal color, whilst Trickery is more of a true emerald green. And lastly, the shade Diversion, again, it doesn't look exactly the same, but the closest that I could find is 24/7. Yeah, they really don't look that similar. The shade 24/7 is clearly much more of a light brown. The first row swatched so beautifully, so let's see how the second row does. Now this is the one with the most problematic shades, especially the first 3 in the row seem to be the one that people have issues with. The first shade is called Potion. This shade swatched surprisingly beautifully, so let's see how the others do. The second shade is called Busted. I don't see any issues so far. The third shade is called Inside Job. Okay, this one is maybe the tiniest bit patchy, but It is nothing major, nothing compared to some of the swatches that we had with the first palettes. The fourth shade is called Mojo, and this one is extremely crumbly, so let's see how we get on with this one. Not bad at all. And the last palette in the shade is called Temptress. This is definitely, hands down, the creamiest and the most pigmented matte that I have swatched yet in the whole collection. We have again reached the dupe swatches part of the video, and this time I'm going to be doing something a bit different. So far I have only compared the Vault Collection palettes to the original Jaclyn Hill palette, but because I noticed that the three shades in this one, Potion, Busted and Inside Job, look remarkably similar, at least in the pan, to three shades in the Jeffree Star Androgyny palette, I really wanted to see how they swatch side by side. Plus, to be honest, these two shades, they don't have any lookalikes in the original Jaclyn Hill palette anyway, so let's just see how the shade Potion looks like next to the shade Military in the Androgyny palette. Okay, the shade Military looks a bit more muted than Potion, but looking at the swatches, the shade Military definitely swatches a bit more even than Potion. Next we get to Busted, and that one, as I already said, doesn't have any similar shades in the original one, but it does look quite similar to the shade Swallow in the Androgyny palette. I was not expecting that. Swatched next to each other, the shade Swallow looks a lot less pigmented, which is funny because I know that the shade works so well on the eyes. I have tried all three of them, Military, Poison and Swallow, and they all perform beautifully, so it's, yeah, I'm actually shocked. Next we get to Inside Job, and this one actually does have a similar shadow in the original palette. So here is Enchanted from the original Jaclyn Hill palette. They do look remarkably similar, but the shade Enchanted is just the tiniest bit more deep. But just for the fun of it, I want to swatch the shade Poison from the Jeffree Star Androgyny palette as well, just to see how it compares. Yeah, again, the colors are completely different because the shade Poison has got much more of a blue in there, and it's again a bit more muted. Both of the last two remaining shades, Mojo and Temptress, had quite similar looking eyeshadows in the original palette. The closest shade to Mojo is Soda Pop. That one swatched a bit funny, but again, I have tried this shadow on the eye and I know that it works fine. It's just, it's weird. Mojo is much more of a cool toned brown, whereas Soda Pop is like a grape tone deep purple. And finally, the closest shade to Temptress is Abyss. Wow, Temptress looks much more of a pigmented, really opaque black versus the shade Abyss, which looks like a dark gray. By the way, I just want to put it out there that my voice is a bit raspy because I am sick currently. I keep coughing like there's no tomorrow, so if my voice is a bit weird, that's why. Now, I do have to say that I'm quite hopeful with this palette because the swatches were really nice. Yet again, I was quite surprised. They were even so good that the shades from the Androgyny palette were kind of lackluster next to the Morphe shades, which is surprising because I know that these three shadows, they work splendidly on the eyes. I absolutely adore this palette. I have a look using this palette as well, and I will link it up there as well, just in case you haven't seen that one. And actually, I am planning on doing pretty much exactly the same look with the Morphe palette because I think it is the perfect test to see how the look turns out with the Morphe shadows, because to be honest, swatches can be extremely deceiving. For instance, the fact that the Androgyny shades didn't really swatch all that well, you would think that they are not good shadows, but they perform on the eyes so nicely. They blend and they are pigmented, and I cannot say anything bad about the Jeffree Star shadows. The same goes for the other palettes in the Vault collection. We have seen shades in the previous palettes that maybe didn't swatch all that great, but that had no issues working on the eyes, and vice versa. We have seen shades that swatched beautifully on the arm, but did really not work all that well on the eyes. The first thing that comes to mind, Sparks from the Bling Boss palette. Let's just jump into this and see whether the shadows actually perform as well as they swatch. I'm starting off with my face and my eyes all primed. If you want to see the details of the products that I used, it will be listed in the description box. The first shade that I want to go in with is Shh. I find the shade name so annoying because it just doesn't roll off the tongue. It's so difficult to say, or I don't really like it. I'm going to start building up the crease. I'm just using circular motions and windshield wiper motions to build up the crease. It is building up nicely and creating this nice even wash of color, so nothing to complain about. Next, we're going to be dipping into the shade Potion. This has a bit of kickback, but really nothing bad at all. I'm going to start building up the crease area. Considering that I took a very light amount, I think it is not looking that bad at all. But let's see how well this shadow builds up. Okay. Taking the previous brush, I'm just going to lightly dust over the edges. I'm adding a bit more. The color is definitely building up. And again, taking the previous brush just to buff over the edges. I don't know, guys, I really don't have anything to complain about right now. The color is building up, definitely. It is pigmented. I don't think that it looks patchy. It applied in the place that I wanted it to go. It didn't grab anywhere funny, and also it is blending out just fine, so I'm not really hating it at all. Next, I'm taking the shade Inside Job and I'm going to put that on the outer corners and also the inner corners, and then slightly start dragging it in the crease as well to lay down the shape for our halo eye. I don't know, guys, I'm applying the shadow, I am blending it out slightly, and it doesn't seem to get patchy or do anything weird. Right now, I, again, don't really have anything to complain about. I'm going back in with the previous brush to go over the edges of the shade Inside Job. I'm going back in the shade Inside Job just to build up the color a bit more. Looks very nice, very pigmented. I am having no issues with blending it out. It's not turning muddy. I can still see the hint of green behind the shade Inside Job from Potion that we laid down earlier. So I can't fault it right now. I don't see anything wrong with it. For some reason, when I did the other eye, it looks a bit more blue on this side. We are moving on to the shade Busted. I want this look to be mainly blue, so I just laid down the more green and teal tone shadows before, just to get that kind of nice aura around the look, but the main shadow will be Busted. And again, going back with the previous brush to just soften those edges. And one last time, just going over the outermost edges. Every single shade has worked perfectly so far. I had no issues with Potion, I had no issues with Inside Job, and now I had no issues with Busted. I was expecting to get a lot of patchy eyeshadow that would not blend, that would stick and grab in weird places. Maybe I got lucky with mine. Maybe The swatches actually match the performance of this palette. I will now start carving out the main part of this whole look, which is the halo or the spotlight eye. So taking a bit of the NARS Soft Matte Complete Concealer in the shade Vanilla, I always use this for all of my spotlight eye looks. I'm going to start applying that in the center of my lid. First drawing this curvy shape in the crease, and then I'm kind of making it more into a rectangle type shape. Now I'm going back in the shade Busted, and I'm very lightly going over those edges to make sure that the transition is effortless. I'm going to take the shade Power Cut, and I'm going to put that right where we just laid down the concealer. I love it. It looks so gorgeous. Going back in with the previous brush, I'm not taking any more of the shade Busted. I'm just using whatever's left on the brush and patting over those edges. And then again, patting over with the shimmery shade. Before we move on to the lower lash line, I just want to add some more depth to the top part of that halo eye. So I'm going to take a bit more of the shade Busted, and I'm going to line the top part of that concealed area. And now I'm taking the tiniest pencil brush, which is clean, and I'm just blending out the edges. And I'm going back in with the 227 to just buff over those edges one last time. I'm quickly going to do the rest of my face off camera, and then I'll come back here and we will finish up the lower lash line. Actually, I changed my mind. Before I go, I do want to try out the shade Temptress as well. I don't want to mess up the blues and the greens that we have on the eyelid. I don't want the black to overpower it. So I'm just going to use it as a liner very close to my lash line. I'm actually very happy with that, and I'm glad that it looks this opaque because I can't really do liquid liner anymore. Some of you guys know, some of you probably don't, but my eyes are really sensitive and I cannot wear liquid eyeliner anymore because it just flares up and really irritates my eyes. So doing something like this with just a bit of eyeshadow is really perfect for me. Okay, now I'm going to go and do the rest of my face off camera, so I'll be back in a jiffy. The rest of my face is on. Again, if you want to see what I used, then you can check the description box. All the details will be there. I did also highlight my inner corners with the highlight that I was using on my face. I used that because in the palette there is no highlighting shade besides Poof, and that is a matte. So I am going to use that underneath my brow bone, but I wanted something a bit more sparkly in the inner corner, so I just went ahead and used my face highlight. So that is the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to take a bit of Poof and put it under my eyebrows. Now that that is out of the way, we can start working on the bottom lid. So first I'm going to take a bit of the shade Potion, and I'm going to run that on my whole lower lid. Next I'm going to take the shade Inside Job, and I'm going to put that in the same place that we just put Potion. And I'm using tapping motions because I don't want fallout on my face. I'm going to run some Catrice 18-Hour Color and Contour Eye Pencil in the shade Up in the Air in my waterline. And lastly, I'm taking the shade Busted and I'm running that in my lower lash line. I'm going back to the previous brush and just running it over that Busted shade. And lastly, using a clean, fluffy brush, I am just running over everything. I'm going to do the other eye and the lower lash mascara and all of that off camera, and then I'll come back here to tell you guys what I think about this palette and what I think about this whole collection. So this is the look. I know that the lips are a bit crazy, but I just got so inspired when I was looking at this other YouTuber, Yuki. I will leave her video down in the description box as well. And she paired her Dark Magic palette look with a black liquid lip, and I thought it looked so cool. This is not a liquid lip. This is from the Anastasia Beverly Hills lip palette. And I just think it looks so bomb. I love the way this looks, but of course if you want to wear this look and you don't want to pair it with a black lip, which is completely understandable by the way, then go ahead and use a nude or something like that. So let's wrap up this video. First things first, I want to tell you guys how I feel about the Dark Magic palette on its own. I really like this palette. I was so prepared to have tons of issues with this because of all the mixed reviews, but I didn't, and I really like the look that turned out. I'm so happy that the palette worked so well because it was one of the palettes that I was most anxious to get. I really like the color theme of this palette as well. I think that with all the warm tone palettes out there, this one is like a breath of fresh air. It's just so cool. No pun intended. It really is. I love how all the shadows play well together, how it is so cohesive, yet you can create so many different looks with this palette. I didn't get the feeling with some of the other palettes, and I will get to that in a second, but yeah, all in all, I really, really, really like this palette. I'm really sorry if you're watching this and you are one of those people who have had a negative experience with this one, because yeah, mine works like a charm and I love it. I really, really do. This is my favorite palette from the collection, without a doubt. I did really enjoy the Armed and Gorgeous one as well, and that is a strong runner-up, but this one definitely takes the cake for me. Now it's time to share my thoughts on the collection as a whole. In general, I did enjoy these palettes. I think that there are so many extremely unique shades throughout this collection, and even though some palettes worked better than others, I still think that it was completely worth the money for me. If you consider the fact that you get 4 eyeshadow palettes for $49 US, when some single shadows cost $16 to $20 US, this whole collection is a steal. And even though there were a few shades in some of these palettes that did not perform quite as well as I had hoped, I still don't feel like I have wasted my money. I'm happy that I got the collection, although I do have my favorites. Armed and Gorgeous and Dark Magic are hands down my favorite palettes in the collection. I also did like Bling Boss in the sense that there were so many stunning and very, very unique shades in there, and I really, really like the color theme of that one, even though Rockstar and Sparks were a couple of shades that did not really perform as well as I would have liked. The rest of the palette worked just fine, so in that sense I enjoyed those three the most. The only palette that I would pass on is Ring the Alarm. In my eyes, it's not as cohesive as the other palettes. You can't really do all that many different looks with that one, and also there were only a few shades that I found to be really, really unique and kind of different. The other shades in there were pretty much just your standard warm-toned orange and brown shadows, which I personally have a ton of. So having tried the rest of the palettes in the collection, I'd say that Ring the Alarm is definitely the biggest lackluster in my eyes. To sum it up, I am very happy that I got this collection. I do enjoy my palettes, some more than others, but in general I do enjoy them. The only thing that you should consider if you are thinking of getting any of these palettes is that there are huge inconsistencies throughout these palettes. So if you're willing to take the risk and you really want to get one of these palettes because of the color theme or whatever kind of reason you have, then I'd say go for it, because I think these palettes are great value for money. But if you are someone who doesn't want to spend their money on something that they are not 100% sure is going to work for them, which by the way I completely understand, then I would just pass on the whole collection. So this was the final episode of the series. I cannot tell you guys how much I enjoyed doing this series. It was so much fun. I loved swatching everything and comparing it to the original palette and coming up with tutorials and all of that. I really liked it, but I hope that you guys liked it as well and that you found it useful or at least entertaining or something like that. Just in case you missed the previous episodes or if you just want to rewatch them, I created a playlist for this series, so if you want to go and see it, I will link it in the description box. Please let me know if you want to see more tutorials using these palettes or whether you'd prefer to see tutorials using the original Jaclyn Hill. Let me know what you guys want to see and I will do that for you. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, then please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel and become a part of my little family. It would mean the world to me. And yeah, I guess other than that, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!